Germany invaded Norway on the 9th of April 1940. Now, it's a relatively short flight from Norway to Aberdeen, and the people of Aberdeen didn't have to wait very long before the Nazis started using Norway as a staging point to launch air raids all over this city. And in this video, I'm going to tell you the story about one of these air raids. It was fully expected that Germany would launch their invasion of Britain right here in Aberdeen because of the close proximity to Norway, which is why to this day there are old World War II concrete bunkers up and down the coast. But before they could launch a ground invasion, they first had to win the war in the sky, which became known as the Battle of Britain. And on the 12th of July 1940, the Battle of Britain was fought in the sky over Aberdeen. 6 Heinkel light bombers took off from Stavanger Airport in Norway that morning and made their way over the North Sea towards Scotland. It's not clear if Aberdeen was their initial target. It's actually quite likely that they were on their way to Fife to destroy an Air Force base there, but for whatever reason, en route to Scotland, they changed their plan. It was a particularly sunny day that day in Aberdeen, and it's possible that they decided to capitalize on the increased visibility here in order to better locate their targets. They made landfall here around about lunchtime that day, and they caught the city completely off guard. They somehow managed to avoid being picked up by radar, so there was absolutely no warning about what was about to happen. The main target that they chose that day was the Hull Russell shipyard, which opened here in 1864. Between York Street, which is the street behind me, and the edge of the harbour, this shipyard occupied around 41 acres of land back then. They made all sorts of ships, but during World War II, they focused their efforts on building ships for the war, which is why obviously it was targeted by these Nazi bombers. It was around 12:45 when the bombs started falling, and in quick succession, around 16 of them fell all over this area. The canteen got a direct hit, as well as the boiler works, which I believe back then was this building here behind me. You can see from this photo the extent of the damage caused to this building, and it wasn't just people inside the buildings that were being killed that day, because bombs were falling on the street all over this area. A guy called George Robertson, who was a young apprentice here at the time, described some of his workmates being killed whilst queuing for lunch out here. He described it like this: there were bodies everywhere, some minus arms and even heads. It was not a sight for any young man to see. In 1940, that bar behind me, the Neptune bar, actually had an upper floor that contained a flat where 13-year-old Lenny Baxter lived with his mum. Now, as luck would have it, they were actually out that day when a bomb fell on their flat, completely destroying it. But unfortunately, that luck did not extend to the 4 men who were having a drink in the bar below, because when the bomb exploded in the flat above, the floor collapsed and the whole flat dropped into the bar below, and unfortunately those 4 men were all killed. Their next target after the shipyard was right here. They dropped bombs on a company called Hogg & Company Granite Works, which used to be located on Regent Walk, which is right up here. That was completely destroyed, And then they bombed King Street, and judging by the photo that I found, bombs were dropped right here in this area behind me. And you can see from the photo the extent of the damage here. A little bit further up the road, a bomb narrowly missed the Aberdeen School of Domestic Science, which used to be this building here to my left before it was turned into a block of flats. You can see from this photo the size of the crater. The people in that building were extremely lucky that day. As these German bombers flew over the city, there was actually very little in terms of resistance here because, like I said, the Germans had attacked without warning. But that would soon change because within minutes of the first bombs being dropped, 3 Spitfires took off from Dice Airport, which at the time was an RAF airbase, and began speeding towards the defence of the city. When these Spitfires arrived on the scene and engaged the German bombers, one of these bombers broke from the rest of the group and the RAF decided to go after it. What ensued was a dogfight between these 3 Spitfires and the one lone German bomber. And everyone on the street that day stopped what they were doing and for 6 minutes just watched as this dogfight played out over the city. The German pilot's initial plan was to head out to sea and try and make it back to Norway. But the 3 Spitfires chased it back inland. It then headed over the harbour, and fishermen there actually opened fire on this German bomber. Back then, fishermen were armed to the teeth because they were often attacked by German bombers as well. The RAF were worried that they were going to get hit by friendly fire, so one of them sent up a red flare to try and communicate to these fishermen that they should stop firing. They then chased the plane across the harbour towards Duthie Park, and somewhere in the region of Duthie Park, they were able to line up behind the bomber and machine gun it. Bullets ripped through the hindcull and it started to crash. As it made its descent, 2 shells from the Tory battery were fired into the aircraft for good measure. But they needn't have bothered. It was already doomed. If you were standing here that day around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, you would have seen an out-of-control aircraft emerge from over that hill there. The pilot desperately trying to regain control of the plane. You would then see it clip a tree, bounce off this road behind me, and go smashing into a half-built ice rink that used to stand right here in this area that's now occupied by a housing development called Headland Court. You would then watch as the aircraft burst into flames, and sadly any remaining crew who were still alive at this point are killed. According to records from that day, 29 civilians were killed and over 100 injured. Most of those people came from the shipyard and the area surrounding it. In fact, 25 people from the shipyard were taken to the wartime mortuary. which at the time was an old comb factory located on Hutchins Street. Most of those people were then buried in the Trinity Cemetery, but the crew of the German Heinkel were actually buried right here in this cemetery on the grounds of this old church in Dice, not so far from the airbase where the Spitfires that shot them down took off from. And here we have the headstones of the German bomber crew. There were 5 people in the German bomber crew that day who lost their lives, but there are only 4 headstones here. I believe one of these bodies was moved after the war, probably at the behest of the family, but there are still 4 German soldiers who remain buried here to this day. The 12th of July 1940 became known as Black Friday. It was the worst air raid in Aberdeen up until that point in the war, but sadly it would soon be eclipsed by one much worse, which happened on the 21st of April 1943. That air raid became known as Aberdeen Blitz, and not only was it the worst air raid in Aberdeen's history, it was also the last air raid over any Scottish city. If you enjoyed this video and you're interested in seeing that one, then please make sure you're subscribed to the channel.